Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Move the Chains podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Munsey. Today we are joined by James Beshara. James is a founder, an angel investor in over 150 companies, a philosophy podcaster, musician, basically someone who has figured out how to operate at a high level without burning out while raising three daughters and surfing in the mornings. So this conversation is going to be about the system behind that. How does James perform at an extremely high level without burning out so that you can do the same as you're pursuing your big, hairy, audacious goals? James, welcome to the show.
Ride dog. Good to see you, and it's a pleasure to be on the podcast with you. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Me too. We've been kind of going back and forth a little bit before we hit record. I want to kind of bring our listeners up to speed. Most people who have achieved what you have achieved describe a specific moment where maybe the old way of operating broke them. What was that moment for you, or what did that transition look like for you?
That is a great question. The reason I love that question is because I know for myself, sometimes I need to exhaust my desires through experience and realize, oh, that's not what I want, or that's not what I need, or that's not how I should be doing it. And the wise person learns from others' experiences. Sometimes I'm just not that wise, and I need to do it the wrong way a couple times to learn. And it was through my 20s that I was building companies, and it was just failure after failure after failure. My 20s was filled with a lot of failure. And the last company that I was building before Magic Mind I was about 3 years in, working 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, thinking I was doing everything right by the book. Outworking every other founder. We went through this program called Y Combinator, and we're at the top of our batch, which is already kind of like elite performance of elite performing startups, and just thought, okay, this is, and we could easily do that for 90 days. We'll do this for a couple of years straight, and sent me to the ER with a heart condition. A big part of that was drinking 6 to 7 cups of coffee a day to cope, to get through an endless to-do list, 15 meetings a day, 100 employees. And it was the biggest company I'd ever worked for, much less run. So I thought it was just through two things: working harder and wanting it more. If you didn't have it, you got to want it more. These are kind of the romantic ideals we are given. And I don't even mean that kind of like broad stroke. I mean that explicitly romantic ideals from the Romantic philosophy, a school of philosophy that is, no philosophers today worth their salt really subscribe to the Romantic philosophy academically anymore. But it has drenched every one of the mainstream TV shows and books and movies with this premise of a will to power of, if you don't have what you want, you just have to want it more. And you can give someone 20 seconds where they're like, that's insane. That makes no sense. Like someone that's 5'1" can never be the best center in the NBA, no matter how much they wanted it. There's just structural challenges to certain goals. And yet you take that into our professional lives outside of a simple example like that in 10 seconds, where you're like, is that the case? And we think like, well, if I don't have this financial goal, I need to want it more. And then you oftentimes you push it away, and then you're like, I want it now. I need to even want it. I don't want it enough. I need to want it more and more. And that really messed with me. That was like kind of what broke me. Is I was like, I don't want enough. I need to want it more. And that's how you go to the ER with a heart condition in your 20s, instead of life feeling like you're in flow.
So I love all of that. I'm curious how you shifted your mindset. How did you rewire the new thought processes of, whatever they then became?
Well, the start of it was just questioning, is this right? Like the way that I'm doing it, this doesn't feel right, certainly in my body. It's not gaining momentum. One of my favorite startup books is What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And the synopsis is, in many ways, in the title. What could get you to a high profile, successful startup at 6 people and you're off to the races might be the very things that limit you from the next plateau you want to hit, the next place you want to go. Meaning, like, to maybe get to a successful seed round or Series A for a startup and your first 10,000 customers, it could just be brute force. It could be in like, I don't care where it comes. I'm just going to want it bad enough. I'm going to kind of delude myself that these are healthy metrics, but they look great in the top line, but beneath the surface, they're not that great. And you can kind of will that part through a dominant personality, through not listening to anybody, certainly the naysayers, and that can be well and good in a certain stage. But then you start to hire executives. That's a terrible way to operate a team where you don't listen to anybody. You just brute force things, and
Right.
you kind of delude yourself to the most optimistic version of metrics. And it's actually a very difficult, delicate traversal, but it's one that's absolutely critical to say, okay, these are the strengths that got me here, and they're still powerful in certain ways, but they could be the very weaknesses that stop me from getting to the next place. So I read that book. I started to have these questions of, maybe these strengths that I keep leaning on might be overused. And when a strength is overused, it becomes a weakness. So then I started to think through, well, what would the opposite version look like out of just like curiosity? There's an episode of Seinfeld where George Costanza just, he starts to do the opposite of everything he thinks he should do. He does the exact opposite, and his life goes like amazingly well. Starts getting promotions, starts being loved by everybody, has all these dates lined up, and I think that is a beautiful philosophical metaphor for I know my own experience. I feel like it could be for others, where there's a lot of selfish tendencies. I want to build something for my own ego engineering. I want to build it to circumvent the typical career path, to financially engineer some milestone. And it's really just selfish, egoistic engineering. I want this for me, me, me. And I started to kind of recognize, wow, this is kind of killing my energy, killing me. And I said this right before we hit record, I'm wired to encourage creators. Like nothing energizes me more than encouraging maybe any one of our 3 daughters, but certainly creators, because I know how hard it is to create. And I think many people, as you as a creator, you might have conversations with 30 people today, and maybe 2 of them will know how friggin' hard it is to create. And so to create something new. And so I love being that voice. One of those 2 conversations in the day with another creator. So when I started to recognize that's what gave me energy, I started to realize, man, I think I need to align what I'm doing each day with the thing that generates my energy, instead of a lot of these things, which it took me a couple of years, but then I realized selfish endeavors that really dissipate my energy.
Yeah. As you're talking through that, I can't help but think about my dad is a huge Van Morrison fan. And there's a Van Morrison song called Philosopher's Stone. There's a lyric in it literally says, even my best friends don't know that my job is turning lead into gold. And
Wow.
it's a song about everything you just said. I'll send you a link to it on Spotify or
Please.
something, but I think you'll love it. Um, but
Yeah, that's
as you,
actually that went right through my mind of when I think about creators, it's pure alchemy. Like
it
you're
is. I mean,
taking you're
yeah, you're
yeah,
literally
go ahead.
making something out of nothing.
Mm-hmm. Like you're taking paper and ink and you write a book. You're taking your internet connection and email and you're turning it into this conversation. You're taking something that on the face of it, a stack of paper and ink is not that valuable to the average person, and then you combine them, and you've written a book that over 100,000 people have found value in a way that not that many people would have found value in just the stack of papers and ink. And I think that's the case for all creators, that they're taking these things and that's ultimately what creativity is. There's, no new energy in the universe. It's just a combination of things that are sitting there. And yet it is that alchemy. It's so beautiful. It can be such a pure act, especially when it is done to serve others. And yet, like Mark Cuban said this once, where he said, when you're building a business, he was talking about businesses, but I think it's the same for any artist, any musician. So when you're building a business, the world wants to kick your ass. No one wants to see you succeed. Like when you get going and you're in the maybe initial rough edge version of your product, you don't have a bunch of customers being like, please, please, please. You certainly don't have your friends telling you in chorus and unison, like, you got to do this, Ryan, go, go, go. You do have the one or two amazing special friends. And then you got 15 that are like, why is he doing that? And then you might have the two or three vocal ones. I mean, like, dude, why are you doing this? Like, my brother told me, recently, he said, man, you should just turn your Instagram off. And, whether it's Magic Mind stuff, I create a lot of music. I have a philosophy podcast, called The Daily Vedantic. And God bless him. He said that, uh, and I understand brotherly competitiveness. And he's 5 years older and seeing these things that a younger brother's doing. And I want to respect the privacy of his life and what he's going through. But I also want to mention this as an example where if there's someone that has this idea inside them, a book, a food truck, a startup, whatever that idea could be, a music album, it's never been easier to create and release it. Ever. It's in history. You can do it on the side. It used to be like unilateral decision. I'm going to make music, so I got to quit my day job. It's like, no, you don't have to do that anymore. Now you can, my daughters make AI music and it's, in minutes. So it's never been easier, but, the exact same pushback is going to exist. You're going to put something out there. In 2026, that might be a podcast you do on nights and weekends, or a book that you wrote on the nights and weekends, and the same pushback from a sibling years in. It's like the Magic Mind stuff. It was probably 3 or 4 years, and maybe 30 million, 40 million in sales before my brothers started to jump on the bandwagon. So that's when Mark Cuban said that, I was like, wait, really? No, the world wants to see these things. The circles I'm in, they want to see new things exist. And then I thought about it, I was like, oh no, he's totally friggin' right. There's like 2 friends that encourage it, and a lot. that actively or passively discourage it.
Yeah. And so if somebody listening is thinking about who those two friends are that you have that support you, like you got to lock those people up. I mean, those are the people you want in your corner for life, and, show them gratitude and show them the same encouragement that they show you. Because, if they're treating you that way, they are unicorns. James,
Has that been your experience, by the way, Ryan?
I have a very similar, as you were talking through that with your brother, I have a very similar experience actually with my father. I used to own a gym, and so I started the gym in 2012, and I had been personal training at a big box gym since, let's see, so I was in New York in 2008, came home 2009. So I lived with my parents for like a year and a half. I was a personal trainer at a big box gym, met the woman who is now my wife. We moved in together. And so I was personal training and then quit that job, started my own gym. For the first year, I rented space from a hole in the wall powerlifting gym, paid them $200 a month to run my business out of there. A year later, moved into our own 3,000 square foot facility. And so I'm telling you all of this because I think it was like 1 or 2 years into having our own facility. 3,000 square foot facility. It's got our name on it. Like, it's ours. My dad calls me up one day. He's like, hey, UVA is hiring a new strength coach. Like, you should apply, for that job. And I don't know if he meant it the way that I took it, but the way I took it was he saw that as like the certainty or the safety of like a real job. And I'm like, dude, I write for Men's Health and Men's Fitness. I have an amazing facility. We're on our way to hitting our financial goals and, building this thing in the community. And, we're getting there. And he still doesn't, to me, the way that I think of it is I felt like my parents, and probably even to this day, people ask them what I do and they don't know how to answer the question. I think a lot of entrepreneurs deal with that, right? Like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer. They don't have one word where when they run into somebody, that they know, they're in a small town. Oh, hey, how's Ryan doing? What's he up to? And they're like, well, I don't know how to tell you what he does, but he's doing well. So I think now they can say that. But in the early, like the first 10 years, so I think that's where it came from. I think they wanted to be able to latch onto a label and be able to say, oh, he's the strength coach at this school or whatever. So,
it's similar to, I make a lot of music and have the last 2 years or so, similar to the research around Magic Mind, where I was like, I can't believe how well known the scientific literature is around some of these compounds to improve focus, flow, decrease stress, and get you into a beautiful flow in your day, that in a way that coffee alone just doesn't, with Magic Mind being this, the world's first mental performance shot. And I would see it work and I'd be like, God, I can't believe no one's done this before. People have, tried, or there's products that make claims, but no one had ever put them into a stack like this. And the reason it's in a drink form and our specific manufacturing technology gets you up to 5x more absorption than a pill or powder. So it's just so much more powerful than anything that had been out there and that I had experienced. And it was the perfect antidote to drinking thinking like, 6 to 7 cups of coffee a day. That's the way. But the same research in the last 5 years has come out around music and certain frequencies that can decrease stress, improve focus. There's certain frequencies and scientific techniques that Andrew Huberman just did an episode on this, maybe about 8 or 9 months ago, on music and the brain, where the research has shown a similar drop in anxiety and stress on par with the leading benzodiazepine prescriptions in the US of a Xanax within 5 minutes of exposure of this music. and I was seeing this music. So I started, and I was saying this research, and I made music for 20 years, and I started to make this kind of music and release it. Just another way to encourage creators and get people into flow state. I just could not believe these kinds of techniques could decrease stress that much. And I told my dad about a year ago. He said, "So what are you up to?" And I said, "Well, I'm making a lot of music." And he paused and he said, "Does that make any money?" and I thought, as a dad now, and at I guess I was 38 at the time, I thought about it. I was like, wow. I said it on the call. I was like, wow. That's the first thought that goes through the mind of, the most powerful parental voice in the household I grew up in. There was no judgment in it. It's like, I mean, there's a million reasons why. It's inherited trauma from the Great Depression. It's been 5 kids, being a parent of 5 kids and things like that. But it was really just a pause of like, oh wow, this is what I kind of grew up around. Mm-hmm. And I think about a brother dynamic or a father dynamic, not, like I was saying, not out of judgment, is just out of like, it is really, to what you pointed out, it is so rare that you should send those people messages when they are the rare encouragers of your creativity and your contributions, and not encouraging you towards safety and security, but encouraging you towards what you're wired for, because they are so damn rare.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm really curious to hear the way that you would articulate this seeming, I'm struggling for the word, but if we look at performance on kind of one side of the equation, and then on the other side, we look at what you and I would both maybe refer to as sort of this like Eastern philosophy, whether it's Bhagavad Gita or Vedanta or Tao Te Ching, in all of these, there are elements of letting go of the results, being process focused. You do the work for the sake of the work with no expectation of the fruits of your labor. And that really seems to fly in the face of results oriented elite performance cultures. So rather than ask you that question directly like this, I'm curious how, with Magic Mind, you guys are approaching 100 million in sales. You've said that, you went through a lot of companies where, you called them failures. So your words, I won't call them failures, but you had a lot of struggles. Now you're having success. How do you balance that or find an equilibrium, a harmony there? And not just for yourself, but I mean, obviously to hit 100 million in sales with a team, people have to be delivering. They have to be doing their jobs, right? And so from a leadership standpoint, what does this look like? How are you creating a culture where performance is there, but it's a place that people, I assume, want to be, enjoy being, they're not burnt out, and they're getting exposure to a lot of this Eastern, philosophy? Yeah,
it's a good question, and I think it goes back to when I had done all of the quote unquote right things, and it didn't work out. I started to listen to a lot of philosophy lectures online, and a lot of these titans of questioning, and I started to love Ram Dass, the Harvard psychologist, Richard Alpert, who ended up changing his name to Ram Dass. Started to love Christian mystics. Started to love reading like Meister Eckhart. Started to love Alan Watson, his beautiful melodic British voice, as Ram Dass and Alan Watts being these bridges between East and West, and I just found them quite soothing around this letting go of these outcomes, because what I found was that was just killing me was so attached to outcomes. And like I was saying before, selfishness as the motivation for all of them. Like I would wax poetically about a mission, and I'd say it was probably 30% of the equation, but 70% was just selfish desire of, man, I want to be my own boss. I want to hit financial milestones, in 5 years instead of 30. I want to have the freedom and agency to create things. Those aren't bad in the face of it, but if that's the primary driver, then it's really hard to build a product that people love. It's really hard to build a company where people feel like they're in it for the customers versus like, man, I'm just here because I got a hard driving CEO that wants to take over the world, and I'm kind of an instrument for him. Right. Immanuel Kant famously said, "Do not view others as instruments of your own will, and do not view yourself as an instrument of your own will." Like, don't burn yourself up. Which, man, you could chew on that for a couple of weeks. I'm like, how would anyone burn themselves? Oh shit, I've done that. I used myself, and so yeah, this receptivity to this questioning then got me to this place where I heard Alan Watts say, like 30 years in, it was the year that he died. I listened to this interview he gave the year that he passed, and this was in the 70s, early 70s, and in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, he kind of like was the leading the beatnik revolution. He led the introduction of East to West, and as a best-selling author in so many books, and so the year that he died, he gives this interview, and he would never say what he was personally influenced by, because he would famously say that think of me like a stand-up philosopher, or like someone making music like Mozart. I have nothing to sell. I'm just going to talk up on stage and talk about these concepts. And so in this interview, the year that he died, he was asked like 40 minutes in, and on YouTube it said like long lost interview with Alan Watts. 40 minutes in, this interviewer says, "So what are your primary influences at this point in life?" And I'm like, oh, he's going to dodge this question. And he said this philosophy, Advaita Vedanta. And I was like, he said, at this stage of my life, my primary influences are Roman Catholicism, actually, and Advaita Vedanta. And I was like, wait, what? Because he was an Episcopalian priest and then left the priesthood to expound around Eastern philosophy. So I was like, wait, holy shit, he answered the question, and these are two unexpected answers. And I was like, well, I grew up Catholic, and I've got a great appreciation for that side of things. Like, what is this Advaita Vedanta stuff? And I had never heard of it. I guess I was about 29, and then I was like, I'm going to spend like 2 or 3 months going deep into this philosophy, because I've gone a couple of years, a mile wide, an inch deep. Let me go into this. If this is the end of the story for him, I can, skip some steps and spend a few months. And that was a decade ago. That going deep and for a few months has just lasted a decade, because Advaita Vedanta, this philosophy, goes back to the 4 oldest philosophical texts in the world called the Vedas, and the end portion of the Vedas are the Upanishads, where the philosophical portion of the Vedas, and the crystallized, like some of the Upanishads are like 13 verses, and it's the whole philosophy, 13 verses. It's not like you need to triangulate like the New Testament or Old Testament. It's like the whole thing in 13 verses, or the whole thing in 25 verses. The Bhagavad Gita, which I've got right here, that we were just talking about, where it's like, how the hell do we not hear about this in America? This, because just the premise alone is so badass, of a warrior prince having an absolute meltdown, and this battle. It's like 13 years in the making. And right before the battle begins, he has this meltdown, and it's this 30-minute conversation between him and his charioteer. So it's just a epic premise for spiritual philosophical text. But and Vedanta means end of the Vedas, so just another word for the Upanishads. But that whole 30-minute dialogue is the whole philosophy. The whole 13-verse cryptic, concise Upanishad is the whole philosophy. And when I read this book called Vedanta Treatise, which is maybe the best synopsis, beginning to end, soup to nuts, explanation of the philosophy, this 5,000 plus year old philosophy. When I read Vedanta treatise, when I got like 3 chapters in, I was like, good God, does this explain everything that I'm experiencing, all of the issues I have? And I'll give you an example. And I've been on that trip ever since. One of those is attach, you lose, detach, you gain. And another word for Vedanta is Sanatana Dharma, another phrase which is called, which means eternal principles. So you could kind of look at it as like 25, 26 eternal principles. One of them is attach, you lose, detach, you gain. Another one is right action is that which generates energy. Wrong action is that which dissipates energy. Another one would be love is seeing no otherness in the world. Another is wisdom is the capacity to see the end in the beginning. So I started to come across these like knowledge bombs that were blowing my brain up. And I was like, how have I never heard a definition of love like this before? Love is seeing no otherness in the world. Oh my God. How have I never heard a definition of wisdom? Wisdom is the capacity to see the end in the beginning. I've heard a couple definitions of wisdom, nothing like that. And then, but the one that really stopped me in my tracks was attach, you lose, or at least at that point in life, attach, you lose, detach, you gain. And I was like, everything I've ever attached to, I myself push away. Dating, push away people. I almost lost my wife 2 weeks in, Ryan, because I was going in way too hard. I fell hard for her. Yeah. So yeah, it was kind of like, maybe there's some truth to these principles. Let me try living them out. And that one specifically also touches on your question of, I started to recognize an unhealthy attachment to outcomes. Stresses me, stresses the team. Then a leader bounces because they're overstressed, and especially if the outcome is like a selfish one, where the team just recognizes like, dude, this guy's just selfishly pursuing, I don't know, some egoistic goal. So it was these kinds of things happening all at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. My reaction when I read those books is very similar to yours. It's just the succinctness of the answers. And when you make something that, like, when your word economy is that well thought through, you get those one-liners and those knowledge bombs, truth bombs, like you said, that are just, holy smokes, that is so well articulated, because there's not a wasted word in there.
Exactly. This is something that my chief of staff, she was putting together some quotes that she was going to put on socials, and I said, hey, each if it's to do with entrepreneurship, you can, it's okay, it's broad strokes. But if it's quoting anything from the philosophy podcast, every single word is so precise. There's a 3-year course in an ashram in India that I've done now on the 5th cycle of it. And you hear the precision in each phrase. You see how unbelievably powerful the precision is. And then if you get loose with it, it loses a lot of its power. And it's because it's a 5,000-year-old lineage of, it's not like philosophy in the West. Philosophy in the West is like it's seen more of like an academic, solitary thing you do in some highfalutin way, like in a cabin in the woods. And our academic system incentivizes you to come up with something new if you're going to be a philosopher in the West. There, it's like, no, there's nothing new. There is nothing new to discover. It's, can you experience what has been articulated by the sages, the masters, the lighthouses, what they have articulated? Can you go from hearing to reflecting on it and then to experiencing it? And it's not about, can you discover some new way of I don't know, some new idea. So when you get into that, you're like, oh God, these mofos have been refining the precision of these words for longer than any human idea and longer than any human empire has ever existed.
I think about that so much. And I think about how short our attention spans are now. And I think about how long it must have taken those writers of all of these great books. How much time did they spend on every single line in those verses? And who's going to do that now? I want to look at, talk about angel investing and kind of get into your mind a little bit. You see so many pitches every single year. What are some of the things that you're evaluating, like your decision-making process? Is it more about the founder or the idea, the product? Like, how are you sifting through the things that come across your desk?
Yeah, they last year I looked at 1,700 deals, and that's about how many I'll probably do this year. I'm not trying to increase that, and that's almost entirely over email. Not that many certainly get to an intro meeting, and I try to do even those. I try to do them asynchronously, where I'm just asking questions over email and they answer over email before a meeting. Or we trade Loom videos, which Loom is a great tool for recording yourself, recording the 3, 4, 5 questions you sent it to the founder, and you can avoid meetings. Meetings are one of the most expensive, unnecessary things. I've got a true war on unnecessary meetings in my professional life and in my personal life. I'll mention in at dinner with friends my war on unnecessary meetings, and it's like every meeting should be 10 minutes or 2 hours, but this arbitrary 30 minutes, 60 minutes makes no sense, and it really destroys our ability to pursue deep work.
Let me get you to expand on that. 10 minutes or 2 hours. Why those two?
Yeah, just because a meeting, and this is where, to answer your question, I can tell within about 7 minutes if I'm going to invest in a company. And the reason that I say that is, it is, what have they sent me beforehand? Are they masters of communication? You've got to be a master of communication to build something of significance, meaning you've got to communicate to investors, co-founders, all your employees, and you've got to over communicate. The best founders I found, Ron Conway told me this, one of the best, maybe the single best angel investor of all time. He told me once, he said he invested in my last company and said the best founders are over communicators. So over communicate with your investors and over communicate with your team and with each other. And so it's such a pattern I look for now is, can they over communicate beautifully in the emails leading up to the meeting? In the meeting, the first 7 minutes, I basically compare it to like grammar, where are they using the right words in the right order? For example, a founder once said within like minute 2, like, yeah, my next company, I'm going to create a video conferencing software that has no latency, because it's very easy. There's like a 23-year-old, and it's like, hey, there are a lot of smart people trying to make video software with no latency, and you're mentioning your next startup in the first few minutes and it wasn't as tongue in cheek as it might sound. And so I was like, okay, that's not what I would do in a pitch. We're talking about my next idea. And there are countless examples of that, where the grammar doesn't quite match up to this person knows what they're building, knows what they're great at, what they're not great at, knows how to grow it. And these are the 5 things I look for. It's founders, product, traction, their knowledge of their traction. Like, do they know how it's growing, why it's growing? Because if something's growing, but they don't really know how or why, that's going to make for difficult DNA when it stops growing. And then, how big is the space? I look at those 5 things and I rate everything on a scale 1 to 5 after the conversation and after the emails back and forth on rounding out the information. But it's a real kind of grammar thing. Within a few minutes, I recognize this is not a great communicator, or person is a great communicator, and that comes through very quickly.
Yeah, interesting. It's really cool or interesting to hear you say how vital communication is for someone to be an effective founder. Um, I find that to be very true when I work with leaders and C-suites. I, I can't tell you how many times I'm telling people there's no such thing as over communicating. And
Mm.
most of the problems come down to, um, I would say either awareness or lack of communication. And, yeah, so the fact that you're looking for that in the first, decision-making process is very telling.
Well, and it is I've noticed from, there's that old phrase of, good judgment comes from experience and experience comes from bad judgment. I made investments and really, like I said, it's just exhausting a lot of desires through experience and realizing, oh, that ain't the way to do it. I made investments and been like, oh, but this person's really smart and they have great initial traction. Their communication is a little wonky. They're a little aggressive, or they take 3 days to get back an email, but I'm going to make the investment anyhow. And I have never seen a powerhouse, a CEO, and being an investor in a handful of unicorns, being friends and I'm an investor in OpenAI, but friends with, from Sam Altman to selling our last company to Airbnb, and Brian Chesky at Airbnb. And we worked literally, our desks were right next to each other, our shoulder to shoulder, and phenomenal masters of communication. And that's just it's a prerequisite for building anything that you're communicating with customers, communicating with team members. But certainly, I think about it in this term of communication. So you want unification, unity in some big goal, and you get that through communication. You don't get that through, we have these 5 core values we talk about. You don't get that cohesion through even a great product or a charismatic pitch. You get that through a mastery and obsession over communication. And then you have communication. The whole team's going in the same direction. So it was really through going beyond and around my better judgment, being like, well, that was kind of aggressive the way that founder handled that meeting, but man, this growth graph is pretty stellar. I'm going to invest. And man, it has blown up in my face enough times where I'm like, nope. Within the first 7-10 minutes, do I love the way this person communicates with me? Because that's how they're going to communicate with everybody on the team for the next 15 years if they're lucky.
Yeah, I love it. That's such a great indicator. All right, so I'm dying to ask, when you talk to the folks from Liquid Death, did you have an idea early on how good they were going to be at marketing?
Yes, definitely. Just by looking at it from the outside, I knew that they had that spectacular DNA,
Mm-hmm.
and that is like, it is more rare than a 10x engineer to have great marketing, and ultimately marketing. And by the way, we were talking earlier about just the philosophical approach to work and how I approach it now versus before. And there's a great quote, and it's I believe it is a quote from the either Tao Te Ching, or it is just a quote attributed to Taoism, of the great way is easy. Yeah, I think it's just a Taoist quote. The great way is easy for the one who has no preferences.
Mm.
And that's another way of saying have no attachments and to certain outcomes, and plunge into the work in front of you. And I get that sounds like how do you make sure these fruits will grow if you're not thinking about that goal? Well, how does any fruit tree, how does the most epic apple tree that's ever existed on the planet, how does it make sure there are a lot of fruits around? Well, it's not thinking about the fruits. Everything it's doing is the roots. Going deeper, and if it's in a great climate, if it's in a great conducive environment for that, then the combination of nature and its nature and its focus on the roots, not the fruits. You have the most epic apple tree that's ever existed on planet Earth. And that's the great companies, the great creators. It's a lot more like that, in my view, than I want to be the best artist possible because there's a lot of prestige around that. So I'm going to start doing that. And you make that decision at, I don't know, 19 or 23. And then you realize, like, man, I'm only thinking about the fruits. Maybe it sends you to the ER with the heart condition. Versus, and this is a Vedantic principle of Swadharma, which is understanding your nature. You find what you're wired for. Find what you're wired for. And then you surrender into the service through that wiring. There's there's a concept from the Gita, the 18th chapter of the Gita, of surrender to a duty-bound existence and immediate peace follows. You surrender into it, and then it is like a surfer, just like, boom, 3 paddles, and you pop up, and you're gliding for 300 feet with the wave doing all of the work. And with Liquid Death, they knew how to surf. They knew what they're great at, marketing. And they found this wave of aluminum over plastic, and the most insane marketing and brand that you could think of, to the point of absurdity, for the least insane, the most sane product ever, water and hydration. Yeah. And they recognize this is a wave that they can really ride. And there's no shortage of challenges, and there's work alongside, but it has been watching surfers go 300 feet on a couple paddles. And I'd say Magic Mind's been very similar. I haven't had a single night of stress with Magic Mind in 5 years. And I had stress 8 nights a week with my last company because I was trying to force something versus surrender into my wiring, which in many ways is marketing, brand, and really wanting to encourage, just being energized by encouraging creators. It's like, this is Creatorade basically for creators with Magic Mind, surrendering into that, and then just jumping on and letting the wave do its thing.
Well, I love Creatorade, and I'm glad you brought up Magic Mind. I did want to circle back to that before we wrap this up. So you touched on it a little bit about how with the liquid delivery system, you have 5 times more bioavailability versus a pill or a powder. What are some of the ingredients that you can talk about that provide this Creatorade effect, in addition to, the caffeine from green tea, right?
Yeah. This started out of just my kitchen, out of necessity. My heart condition limits me to about 80 milligrams of caffeine, half a cup of coffee, or else it starts to mess with my heart. I get irregular heartbeat, and then I have to take medicine that kind of just knocks me out for 24 hours. So it started from just that need of, how do I get the most out of this half a cup of coffee? And my doctor, during the right before I went in for a checkup, and that's when they put all of this gear on and found this irregular heartbeat, and said, hey, we've got to go across the street to the ER. Because my heart had been beating at about 175 beats a minute for about 3 weeks at that point. And because the doctor was like, how long has this been going on? Because it's so fast that you don't feel palpitations. It feels like a flutter. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, yeah, it feels like butterflies in my stomach, but like strong butterflies that haven't gone away in like 3 weeks. He's like, man, that's not butterflies in the stomach. Your heart's been beating at 175 beats a minute. And if it's been 3 weeks, we need to go to the ER right now. But he said this one thing to me right before we went over. He said, by the way, with your condition, for the time being, don't drink any more caffeine than maybe half a cup of coffee, 80 milligrams of caffeine a day. I was like, what is that? 2 cups, 3 cups? And he's like, no, that's a half a cup of coffee. And I was like, I said to the doctor, there is no effing way, but I said the actual F word. I said, there's no effing way I can get through the day on half a cup of coffee, doc, like a total addict. And he said, have you ever tried switching to green tea? It has this compound in it called L-theanine that dials down your body's absorption it extends your body's absorption of caffeine over a longer period of time and dials down the body's stress response to caffeine. And that single line got lodged in my brain to where I was like, wait, there's something that I can add to my caffeine that could extend its absorption. And wait, when I drink caffeine, it's spiking my what? My cortisol, my stress hormone. So that was now about 12 years ago. And for 7 years was just going down the rabbit hole. My engineering brain was going down the rabbit hole of what are the other things that nature and science give us to get the most out of our morning routines. And for me, out of that, half a cup of coffee. So I started to find all of this research that I touched on earlier that was like just sitting there for people to discover. I ended up writing a book on this topic called Beyond Coffee way before I think I'd start a company in this space. And was just the nootropics guy in Silicon Valley and at Airbnb. And I had this list. People would read the book, and especially friends, they'd be like, just tell me what I should take in the morning. And it was these 12 ingredients, still the same 12 ingredients in Magic Mind, where we've got a couple decades of research around these ingredients. Simple ingredients we've heard about, but the power of these ingredients for our mental performance, productivity, cognition, balance, decreasing stress is just, I always tell people, just try a Magic Mind and watch what happens. And the ingredients include things like turmeric or cumin. Turmeric decreases inflammation. Inflammation is one of the leading causes of mood disorders. Decrease inflammation, it can instantly improve your mood. You have things like ashwagandha that naturally decrease stress. And the leading cause of procrastination is not it's actually not fatigue or where you need more caffeine. It's not lack of motivation. It's actually low-grade pervasive stress and anxiety. You have motivation to do that presentation. The reason you're putting off is because low-grade stress and anxiety, because you care so much. You're so motivated that you're like, what are people going to think? The CEO is going to be in there. Maybe I should just push this off and present it later. But if you get rid of that low-grade stress and anxiety, and ashwagandha can help with that, then it's phenomenally powerful for you. Just to-do list melts away. One of my other favorite ingredients is Bacopa monnieri, maybe my favorite ingredient in the whole stack. It's an Indian herb that is given in India and China to people with ADD. And the way that it works is it decreases, and it's given way before pharmaceuticals. And the way that it works is it decreases impulsivity. So, and all naturally, just this beautiful, amazing herb that tastes awful. We're the first people to put it in a drink and make it taste great. Have you tried a Magic Mind, Ryan? Do I need to send you a bunch?
I have not tried Magic Mind yet.
Okay,
please.
I'm going to send you a bunch.
And I think you guys have a sugar-free
okay.
one, right? Send me.
We've got a sugar. Yeah, well, I'll send you a bunch of the sugar-free, and it tastes so good. It's like the thing I'm most proud of is perhaps how much research has gone into every one of these ingredients and just everything that goes into Magic Mind, but also that we got Bacopa to taste good because it is so powerful that it can decrease impulsivity by up to 50%. And what that means, what that translates to is you're in a conversation, you're dialed in. You're in that 3-hour block of work, you're dialed in. You're not reaching for your phone for social media, checking your texts. You're just like, wow, I'm present here. I mean, it's dad juice as much as it's Creatorade. I'm just with my kids and I'm there with them. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into this delicious little 2-ounce shot.
I love all your fun names for Magic Mind. And so we didn't even talk about this prior. So I don't think you know that I have a big, extensive background in nootropics and the biohacking space as well. So I helped several companies from 2015 to 18, was at the Bulletproof Conference every year and did a lot in that world for a while. So
no way. The episodes I've listened to, it hadn't come up.
That during that time period, I was hosting something called the Optimal Performance Podcast. And when it launched in 2015, we went all the way to number 2 on iTunes. I was the host. I didn't own it. I was the host for a company called Natural Stacks that you probably are aware of if you're in that space, and did a lot of work with them for a couple of years.
What are your favorite ingredients in the morning, knowing everything that you know?
You know what? This is not a natural one, but I'm a huge fan of piracetam. I have just always had success with it. I did this is actually in my first book. I did a QEEG with Dr. Andrew Hill at I cannot remember the name of his place, but he was a gerontology professor at UCLA, and he actually did some nootropic consulting with some other company in that space. But my normal brain waves are one standard deviation high for alpha brain waves, which would be a diagnosis of ADHD. And so most of the nootropics that increase alpha brain waves, namely alpha brain, they exacerbate my high baseline alpha brain waves. So I've learned that there are certain supplements that make me more ADD. And I have gravitated to, over the years, I've just simplified it over. I've tried everything. I went way down the rabbit hole, and now I'm sort of a minimalist, but I'll do 1,600 milligrams of paracetam with 150 milligrams of alpha GPC. I cannot do citicoline, CDP. That it does not go well with my biochemistry. And I think that's the crazy thing to me about all of the nootropics is how individual it really is. I mean, you could say the exact same thing, but in reverse, right? And like maybe you can't tolerate alpha GPC, but you love a different form of choline.
Alpha brain was very similar in that it was like jet fuel to me, and it made me jittery. It was too strong, and maybe it's tied to an alpha brainwave aspect, but it certainly was too strong for me. And the unique thing that I couldn't believe wasn't on the market, still isn't on the market, was in some ways people talk about Magic Mind as an energy shot. You can take it alongside your coffee because of this unique aspect in that it has it's not chock full of stimulants. In fact, half the ingredients are about decreasing stress. As much as emphasis on improving alertness, focus, and cognition. And that was through the research of finding out the primary causes of procrastination. And in that, me having no idea that every Red Bull that I would drink or every extra cup of coffee was exacerbating, spiking my cortisol and making me less likely to get to that next to-do list item. When I thought, like, this is what I need to get through this current to-do list item. But I think alpha GPC is phenomenal for blood flow to the brain, for context switching. We don't have it in our stack, but one of the and paracetam is so great too. It's just I didn't want people to have to cycle, and I don't know if you cycle it, but I wanted to create a product that didn't require a whole lot of cognitive overload of people being like, okay, I'm just a school teacher, and now I need to remember the 2 days on, 1 day off, or 5 days on, 2 days off.
Yep. No, absolutely. And so I only take paracetam Monday to Friday. So basically 5 on, 2 off. And I think, as you know, with any racetam, you've got to take a choline source or you'll get headaches because you burn through choline. And so that's why the alpha GPC. Interestingly, alpha GPC has been shown in physical performance studies to boost growth hormone off the charts. If you take, I want to say it's 300 to 600 milligrams, 90 minutes before strength training, it boosts growth hormone. And so actually, this is a true story.
Really?
In 2009, when I met my now wife, she was doing an endocrinology fellowship at our local VA. And they tested my growth hormone, testosterone, did DEXA scans. It was part of this huge study. And the doctor who, she was a research fellow. So the guy that she was there working underneath of was an endocrinologist. And he came up to me and he thought I was taking growth hormone because it's pulsatile in nature. And my pulses were so high that he thought I was injecting it. But I was eating a low carb diet and I was supplementing with a liquid alpha GPC at the time that was giving me those spikes. And so I've just always been a fan of it because the research, like you said, the research is there, but it works. I mean, it is really effective. So anyway.
Yeah. It's reminds me of one of my favorite ingredients is in the stack, or one of my other favorite ingredients is cordyceps to increase ATP and endurance, and it's so great for strength training as well as any endurance training, and it's all natural, and it's a beautiful complement. And one of the things that that I also noticed was, and this is certainly not, I can't point to it as causal, but my LP little a started to go down once I started to add cordyceps into the stack. And for those listening, LP little a is like notoriously almost impossible to figure out what makes it go down for people. There's no like, you need to, your folate's down, so you need to supplement with iron. And but I knew that it mapped directly to my cordyceps supplementation right when I was experimenting with that. So Magic Mind launched 5 years. 5 years ago, I probably experimented with cordyceps alongside lion's mane. They're both in Magic Mind. Probably 7 years ago. And in the last 7 years, I've recommended cordyceps to people with high LP little a, and it has had near like, I'd say like 60, 70% I follow up just because I'm so fascinated by this, and it has had a huge, huge impact.
That's fascinating.
But I don't know the mechanisms of action. I don't know why it has such a, maybe ATP production is correlated with lower LP little a, but we know. So what I love about many of these ingredients is they're, FDA GRAS, so generally regarded as safe. They've been anything in Magic Mind's been studied for decades, and even my 8-year-old has a little bit of Magic Mind free. She loves it in anything. Every one of our products is third party tested and even more research than our own internal team led by Andrew Weil. Dr. Andrew Weil is like the goat of much of this space, and it's everything in our product line is good for 8 and up, but I don't want her to have any caffeine, so it's the Magic Mind free. But all of that is to say that it is for the safety profiles of these ingredients. I think we're just going to have an explosion of awareness and re-exploration of these compounds for completely orthogonal things that we never really thought about, like growth hormone and alpha GPC that you just mentioned, or potentially cordyceps and LP little a.
Yeah, no, absolutely. If anybody listening wants to try Magic Mind, where can they find it?
They can go to magicmind.com, and I'm going to give you a special promo code that is founder promo code 40 James to get 40% off. So it's basically at cost. For your first order, so feel free if you want to go wild and get a big order. We wouldn't be a very good business if it wasn't if it was beyond the first order. But 40 James, and feel free to type in and try out 100 James, see if that works. But 40 James is a promo code, and then if you could shoot me a note on Instagram anytime if people have questions about Magic Mind or how we build the company. Or anything about the philosophy that informs Magic Mind. I help run 2 other companies, leading and advising these companies as well as 150 others as investments, and then 3 little kids and just pure flow each day. This is actually my only meeting all day today.
When you said you had a war against meetings, I felt really special that I get to talk to you live, not asynchronously. So
it's unnecessary meetings. This encouraging creators like you and all of your listeners. That is, I couldn't think of any better use of time. But unnecessary meetings where everybody knows that old meme of like, this meeting could have been an email. I've got a war against those for sure.
Yeah. So James, I really have had a blast chatting with you. Thank you so much for being on here with us. Everybody listening, we'll put Magic Mind website in the description in the show notes, along with the code 40 James, so you can try Magic Mind. Make sure you check out James's website, the Daily Vedantic podcast. And there's a great essay that James wrote. We didn't even get to touch on your pillars of mental health, but I'll link that in the show notes so people can check that episode out if they want, or the article. And for everybody listening, as always, really appreciate you being a part of the Move the Chains podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with somebody you know who will benefit from the things that we talked about today. And as always, keep moving the chains. James, thank you so much for being here.
Ryan, thanks for having me.